All right, welcome to Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Escalante from Santa Cruz PD in California. He has 29 years experience in law enforcement, and I'm really excited to have him a part of the show. Welcome to Words of the Wise, Chief Escalante. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I am really looking forward to sharing what you guys are doing organizationally with wellness. But before we do that, for anyone who doesn't know who you are, if you can give us a little background. Who is Chief Escalante? How'd you get started in law enforcement, and what did those 29 years look like for you?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, I've been with the same organization for 29 years. Started off as a community service officer, which is a non-sworn position here, and then worked my way, through the ranks over time, including several different assignments, gang enforcement, gang task force, field training officer, sergeant, SWAT sort of commander, a number of different assignments. But I was born and raised here. My brother was an officer here for a number of years, so it was sort of a natural place for me to stay and grow my roots. So got here back in 1996, I think it was, and been here ever since.
Does time fly by? Does it feel like it's gone really fast, or does it feel like it's been 29 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think, your career goes in different waves. There's times where there's different challenges and it seems to slow down. And then there's other times you look back and you can't believe how fast it's gone. So, um, yeah, it's been quite the career.
And there's two things I wanted to touch on. So, one, when we were talking offline, you said you were born and raised at Santa Cruz PD, which I thought was a really funny thing to say and really kind of cute, born and raised in this agency. But it's interesting that you said there's times when things are challenging where things slow down. And I can completely relate to that. I think anyone listening to this can relate to that. It's like when you're having fun and things are great, it feels like things go at a blink of an eye, but it's the challenging times that feel like they go in slow motion a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I can give a number of examples, but one that stands out to me is happening right now because we are, challenged with staffing and the number of officers that we have versus the number that we need. Um, and we have a number of people that are, let's say, in the police academy or in the field training program at different levels, and just wanting to fast forward the calendar to get them out on their own to sort of relieve the rest of our organization from the strain and stress that they're under because of our staffing challenges. So it's like I count down every day, every week, hoping that they're successful in the training program, and at one point they will be out on their own as a solo beat officer. So I right now I'm feeling like the calendar's moving really slow.
Yeah.
Wish I could fast forward it to about 6 weeks from now, and hoping that we'll have some relief for the rest of our organization.
Yeah, that's totally understandable. And I think for anyone listening to this who isn't really aware. I mean, California, especially, I think it's all across the country, but California, especially right now, is struggling with a staffing shortage. And you, to me, from what I've heard, it sounds like everyone's kind of, competing against each other to try to find candidates. Is this the lowest you guys have been since you started, or have you seen something like this before in the past?
Um, it might be the lowest. I mean, we're starting to creep upward in a positive direction. So
Good.
I would say, maybe about a year ago we were even worse. But we've been slowly sort of making progress. But yeah, I mean, right now we are, 66% staffed.
Wow. Okay.
To include those that are in the academy and training or injured, right? That's 66% of healthy sworn officers that we have available. So it's been rough, and we're mostly rough on the men and women of the organization. But they've persevered, and I'm hoping we're starting to turn a corner. But again, the calendar's moving slow right now.
Yeah, I totally get that. I wanted to ask you, you use the word persevere. How have you personally, through all of your different assignments, through this hard time, what are things that you've done for yourself to help you kind of push through those hard times, especially when things are moving slow and you feel like things are weighing down on you a little bit? What are some things that you've done that have helped you throughout the years?
Um, well, for me personally, exercise is really important, and you know, I'm sure there's a chemical explanation around it, but for me, it just at the end of the day, being able to go into the gym and break a sweat and work out is therapeutic for me. Also just walking my dog on the weekends on the beach. Is therapeutic for me. Um, Sometimes it's therapeutic to talk to somebody at home about work and the struggles or frustrations, and sometimes it's therapeutic to just let it go and talk about something else. So, but I think for me personally, the biggest thing is exercise, and staying active and sort of burning the negative energy.
Yeah. And you had said that to me before, that line of like burning off the negative energy. And I really liked that. And we talked about this a little bit, but that's how I feel too when I go and I have like a really, really hard workout, or I like go and do, like for me, I'm into yoga. I think everyone knows that by now, but I'll go do, a yoga class or whatever it is. And it does feel like you're kind of just like leaving all of that behind a little bit, or you're leaving it on the mat in a sense, you're kind of sweating it out. You're also, I think, in that moment, training yourself to be more mentally resilient. I think that's one thing that a lot of people maybe don't realize is like when you're doing something for yourself, especially if it's a hard physical workout, like you are training yourself to be able to withstand the discomfort and the challenge of that particular workout or exercise. And then it's just building that mental resiliency up long term. I don't know if you feel that ever, but
Yeah, for sure. It might even just be that 30 minutes of not thinking about work, right?
right.
Or the challenges of what's coming, on the next day or the next week. So it might be just the mental opportunity to escape
Mhm.
all the other stuff, and just sort of think about nothing is sometimes a good thing.
You know what's really interesting? You said escape, but you're being present. And I think that that was such an excellent way to say it because I think that when we think of escapism, usually it's in a negative context, right? It's like, okay, you're escaping or you're numbing or you're avoiding. And these are all like negative coping mechanisms to stress. And so usually those are going to be associated with, um, some sort of addiction or drinking or gambling or shopping or whatever it is to not have to deal with the issue or the challenge. But what you said was really interesting. You said that you were escaping all the mental noise by being super present. And I
Well,
love that because that's what we're looking for when it comes to stress management. It's being as present as you can, so you're not thinking about stuff that happened in the past, you're not worrying about things that happen in the future, you're being super present in the moment, and that's regulating your nervous system. So I think that that's a really interesting take, that you're escaping all the mental stuff by being present, and that's super healthy. I don't know if you recognize or realize that you said that, but I thought that was really cool.
yeah, I mean it's a good way of putting it, versus to just finding something that makes you feel well. Um, Maybe not in the midst of it, but afterwards. There's definitely a relief, and um, it certainly is healthy physically, but it's probably even more so healthy mentally.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that a lot of times we forget that. And it's kind of this like snowball effect too, because like I don't know about you, but like when I'm really stressed, I don't always have the motivation to go do something. Sometimes it's easier to be like, I'm just going to sit here and not deal with it. And you have to kind of pick yourself up and say, no, I'm going to go do something. And physical and mental health are really intertwined. So the better you feel physically, the better you feel mentally, and it kind of feeds into each other. So I appreciate your perspective on that. I know that, we talked offline a little bit, and I love talking to California agencies because I feel like you've all been ahead of the curve a little bit and kind of leading the charge in the wellness space. And, I think a lot of, I say us included because I'm from Phoenix, but, we kind of follow your lead when it comes to wellness. And so I know that there was an event that happened within your organization back in 2013, and this didn't necessarily jumpstart your wellness program. You already had, wellness programming in place. But if you wouldn't mind sharing what that event was, how that impacted your agency, and how that maybe catapulted or how that created even more focus in the mental wellness space.
Yeah, so back in 2013, we had a sergeant and a detective that were shot and killed that were out in the field trying to contact a suspect related to a sexual assault investigation. Um, and I could just speak for myself personally because I think at that point in time I might have been, I was a lieutenant. Um, so I wasn't necessarily deeply involved in any sort of wellness program that we had here at the police department. We always had a peer support team. Um, but it wasn't until I became the chief where I kind of added peer support slash wellness team.
Mhm.
Um, but anyways, back to that particular incident, I can always remember talking to other agencies that have been through these sort of tragedies. And one of the things that stood out was they shared that you will have individual officers that may never come back to work. You may have officers that will struggle from that incident immediately, or you may have some that will struggle 5 years from that moment, right? Everybody recovers differently.
Mhm.
Everybody actually handles a situation, traumatic incident like that differently. So back then, I knew that, well, we had two officers that never returned to duty from that incident. Um, they were involved in the aftermath of shooting the suspect. Um, I knew at that moment we would have people that would suffer immediately, but we would also see in 3, 4, 5 years from that moment people that would all of a sudden pop up with issues, right? So it just sort of enhanced, in my opinion, the need for resources for our folks. And so, yeah, and 10, well, 13 years later, not 12 years later, we're sitting here, and I'm sure there's some that were here at that moment that are still struggling, right? And so it's important for me as the chief to make sure they have them and their families have resources to help them through that.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that you went through that as an organization. I think that it is really quite amazing that you looked at that and said, "Hey, this is obviously a tragic moment in the history of our department, and it might not affect someone right now, but it might affect them in the future. And how can we make sure that we have resources in place now that are going to help them long term? Because we see it all the time. And I'm sure you've heard this too at different like wellness conferences, but you might have something buried down deep that you didn't know was going to come back and bite you later. And it might not even be a super traumatic event that brings that back up to the surface. And now you are, put in a position to have to process something that happened a long time ago. And that happens quite often because I do think that it's human nature, but I also think, especially in this profession of, kind of shoving things down and keep going because to a certain extent, I mean, that's kind of what you have to do day to day. You're going from call to call and you have to kind of compartmentalize and put things down and save them for later. And the hope is that there's resources to be able to offload those things and process those things when you can and as often as you can. But sometimes there's things deep down that come up to the surface maybe 10 years later. So I think that that's a great perspective to have that, hey, like this happened now, but in 10 years from now, I want to make sure that we have the resources as well.
Yeah, it was interesting insight from other folks that I had talked to in different agencies that have been through this sort of these sort of tragedies, and it was very helpful. And I've spread the word to other agencies around our area that have gone through tragic incidents since 2013, and I've tried to pass along that message. But yeah, you're exactly right. Everybody heals differently. Everybody, I guess, is different in their own way of opening themselves up to help,
Right.
to assistance, right? Some are very stubborn, very very old school. Like you said, compartmentalize it, keep it internal, and some are more open to raising their hand and asking for help.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that it's important to recognize that and to make sure that you have the resources for every type of person. And it sounds like that's what you're doing, because you have to meet people where they are, and it's not a one size fits all. And there's been countless conversations that I've had where it's like, yeah, well, like how do you get the people who are more resistant to it? And it's like maybe you don't. You just have to have the resources available, and you have to be ready if and when they need them. And that might be now or that might be 10 years from now, but at least you're ready and you're prepared if and when they do come seeking those. Yeah.
And I think to touch on that a little bit, I think that's when it's important for the people around the officers, whether it's fellow officers or friends and family at home, that's when it's really important for them to recognize some of the things that are going on in their lives, and also be a part of getting that person into some help and tap into the resources that are available.
Yeah, and I would love to kind of dive into some of those resources that you have available organizationally. I know that you've listed some of them, and I know that you like to be as creative as possible. So if you can kind of explain some of the things that you do have available, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, so we have a peer support team, which obviously is built with peers, both sworn and non-sworn from throughout the organization. Um, we have a contracted psychologist that is a part of that team. So we have a contract with basically a company that officers can tap into. Our city as a whole, and I think most cities have a version of an employee assistance program, EAP.
Hmm.
That's more of a sort of a confidential, 30-minute conversation that you can call somebody for assistance. Um, I mean, we've taken a lot of pride in building a robust gym facility here in our department so officers can use it. We're not at the point where we're able to work out while on duty, but either before or after or on a day off, you can come in and work out. I think in our gym offers a variety of options for people. Um, we also have, a retreat up in Northern California that we've contracted with. That's all confidential, so I don't know who's using it. But it has been an amazing resource, I know, for some folks here
Hmm.
that have been really struggling. Um, gosh. And as I mentioned to you, I mean, I've just told the team, look, the sky's the limit. I mean, I know funding is obviously a huge factor, but we'll find a way. So I've always just encouraged them to continue to go to different seminars and trainings and hear what other people are doing. And is there a way for us to incorporate different creative ideas? We just put, I don't know, maybe about a year ago, a little less than a year ago, we put in these therapeutic saunas
Mhm.
in the men's and women's locker rooms. And I think our staff has really enjoyed those, especially after work, to just sort of decompress. And again, I'm sure releasing those negative energies before they shower and head home. I've heard a lot of positive feedback about that. Um, Therapy dogs, we're looking at those. We want to incorporate those into the organization. I know there's a lot of that that's gone on across the country, and a lot of I've heard a lot of positive feedback about those programs. So yeah, open to any creative ideas that are out there, really assessing them and looking to see if they fit for us. But we have made it a priority to ensure that our staff, both sworn and non-sworn, know about the resources that are available to them, and that it is important to reach out and take advantage of those resources.
There are a few things in there that I wanted to touch on. One, I love that you said sworn and civilian, that you're encompassing the entire agency and treating it as a team, because I think that that creates that culture, right, where it's everyone feels supported and like they have the resources. But I also love how you said we'll make it work. We'll make it happen. Funding can be a challenge, but we'll make sure that we do the things that we need to support our people. And I think that when you have that mindset, then you have the opportunity to be creative. If you're like, whatever we got to do, we'll make it work, instead of, well, we don't have the funding, so we're not going to do it. It's a totally different mindset. I also two things. One, I was going to ask you, if did you ever think that, 29 years ago, would you have imagined that you would have had saunas in the bathrooms when you started in this career?
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, a lot of the things that we are doing or other agencies across the country are doing, I would have never imagined. A lot of the stuff that's going on, it's great. It's necessary. I think it'll definitely help those involved in the profession moving forward. And it's probably long overdue, but definitely not the sauna concept. But I'm glad
Yeah,
we pulled the trigger on it.
for sure. And the one thing you said about it that I thought was really cool, and I think a lot of people forget about this, is down regulation before you go home. And that's I mean, there's obviously there's ways to prepare for the shift ahead, right? You want to mentally and physically be prepared for the shift. But this idea of how do you offload the shift and down regulate before you go home to your family so that you can be a more present and better version of yourself for your family. And I think that that's a part of wellness that's not talked about a lot, and it's maybe not something that a lot of people consider. So I love that you said that, of like, hey, our folks can go in there and kind of offload some stress before they shower and go home.
Yeah, it's that's probably one of the biggest challenges is turning your sort of work mindset on and off. And that's really one of the challenges in our profession. And I think it's more of a chemical thing that I shouldn't be, trying to speak to, but it's real, about going home and always being on edge or at high alert and all these sort of things that take a toll, not necessarily at that given moment, but it certainly over time does. And so, yeah, really trying to get out of that, I'll call it like a tactical mindset that you sort of have to have at work all the time, but then now you have to go home and do normal family life, right? And so turning that switch on and off can be tough. So uh, anything we can give our staff to sort of help them with that transition, I think will be helpful for them in the long run.
Yeah, and I know you brought this up before about, getting the families involved and, making sure that those conversations are happening, and then now mentally preparing for home life and life outside of the career. How do you think agencies can get families more involved in the wellness aspect? Like, how can you create that home wellness outside of work wellness?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I think it is challenging. I said, for one reason or another, I think officers are very protective of their families, and they don't necessarily get them too involved in work stuff.
Hmm.
What we've tried to do with some success is early on when an officer gets out of the police academy, and we start what we call an orientation phase for them. We bring their families in to sort of explain to them all the resources that are available. Um, it's still a little bit of a challenge to get folks to open up with their
Hmm.
family lives, with work life. But as we talked about, I think it's just hugely important because after a while, we think what we're doing every single day or night is normal, and it really isn't normal. Um, so what happens is there's things about related to stress or your lack of wellness that start popping up maybe at home, and the employee themselves won't pick up on that. But family members or loved ones might actually pick up on some signs or symptoms that are, concerning. So that's why we try to do that, and I feel like we can continue to do more to try to educate and work with the families to make sure that the employees are well connected when they're off shift.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things you said just like popped in my head. I'm like, I think you need the people who are going to call you out a little bit and hold you accountable. And one of the conversations I have all the time is how law enforcement tends to hang out with law enforcement. And one of the pieces of wellness advice that I've heard from other chiefs is like have a community, friends, family that are not cops, so that when you are away from the job, you feel more normal and you have that grounding and you have, people who can call you out if you're acting different. How important do you think that is to have interest outside of the job, to have a community that's maybe not fully law enforcement related?
Yeah, I think there has to be definitely a good mix,
Hmm.
because it is hard because it's easier to talk to a fellow, officer, a peer, because, they've sort of been
They
there,
get
they've
it.
done
Yeah.
that sort of thing, right? And that's difficult to discuss at home. Um, and there's also, I think there's a little bit of a reluctance to share sort of the dangers and dangerous parts of our job with families. You don't want them to be
Right.
fearful while
Yeah.
you're at work. So, but there is definitely. I always like to tell people to find an activity with somebody outside of work. So not only do you have sort of that physical activity, exertion of the negative energy, right? Whether it's golf or here we have surfing or mountain bike riding. We have amazing mountain bike trails around here. Find something to do with somebody outside of work. So you're talking about other stuff outside of work. So I think it is important to have good pals at work to talk work stuff, but then definitely find not only a buddy, but an activity you can do offline.
I think that's great advice. And it's really interesting because when you were talking, I've never had this thought before, but I could imagine that if you didn't have any friends or peers to talk to within law enforcement, how incredibly isolating that could feel too, because you feel like no one can relate to you. And so I love that you said it's a mix. Like you want to have people that can relate to what you're going through and what you've seen and the stressors that you're under with the job and be able to offload that and talk to a peer, talk to, a buddy within the organization. But then to also have an activity or community outside of it too. So I appreciate you saying that because I could see that how if you didn't have anyone to talk to in law enforcement at all, how you would kind of feel like you're on your own island and no one really understands you.
I think that's sort of the problem is then you don't talk about whatever's bothering you at all,
Right.
right? That's also a bad thing.
Right.
So there needs to be, uh, you know, it needs to be measured. You shouldn't be at home talking about work all the time. Um, but there should be an opportunity for you to vent or, express your frustrations or feelings of some sort, and then be able to actually pay attention to your family and enjoy that time outside of work.
Yeah, 100%. I wanted to circle back a little bit. I know in the beginning we talked a little bit about the challenges that you're seeing right now with staffing, and hiring new officers or new employees. How are you seeing this younger generation as far as their receptiveness to wellness? Is that something that is a priority to them? Are they asking for wellness resources? Um, is your wellness program, kind of a part of that recruitment process or like a bonus that you guys are offering that's getting new people in? What are you seeing with the up and coming kind of younger generation?
I feel like that they are, which is a good thing. I think that they are more likely to reach out to resources.
Mhm.
They're more likely to discuss maybe some challenges that they're having. They're more likely to be engaged in the wellness conversation and try to find better ways of doing things, right? I think the older generation, like when I first started, you didn't speak up, you didn't talk about wellness. You just did your job, and we're thankful for the paycheck you got every 2 weeks. And now I think the younger generation is more likely to speak up and to raise their hand, um, make suggestions, have ideas, look for ways to improve. And they're also more likely to reach out to the resources that are available.
Yeah, that's, I mean, to me, that sounds great. And it's really interesting because I've heard of something similar, that's like the younger generation is maybe more why driven. So, like you said, asking questions like, why are we doing this? Making suggestions like maybe we can do it this way. Maybe this would be a little bit more efficient or effective. Um, but I've also seen from my experience that the younger generation are also invincible. And I say that in quotes. And so they're more receptive to wellness, but maybe not necessarily taking advantage of them right away, especially like when it comes to like injury prevention and kind of the more proactive stuff, because they're like young and they're super young right now. Like when I go into an academy, I'm like, oh no, I'm the old lady. I'm walking in here now. But they're young and they feel good. And so some of the proactive wellness stuff, at least physically, maybe not taking advantage of quite yet. But I have heard the same thing of like, yes, they're receptive, they want it, they're asking questions, they're, looking to make a positive impact.
Yeah, I mean, it is a challenge to sort of get them to see their careers 20, 25 years from now, their bodies, their minds, their families 20, 25 years from now. I don't think that'll probably ever change,
Yeah.
really. The older generation's always trying to teach the younger generations, and it's always a challenge to get them to listen. And
Right.
sometimes they have to just experience it themselves to learn. That's how we learn, is by mistakes.
100%.
Um, so um, I think that you know, you continue to try to get them to understand the big picture. And I'll use a really quick example. In our staffing challenges, we had a number of folks that wanted to go to 12-hour shifts. We will currently work 4 10-hour days. They want to go to 12-hour shifts. And, I'll be honest, number one, the data didn't work out where it was actually going to add bodies to the field as much as they thought. But the other piece to it was is that I think a lot of them wanted to work 12 so they can get 4 days off,
Hmm.
right? That sounds great. From my perspective, I've really pushed back against it because I feel like a 12-hour day that more than likely turns into a 13 or 14-hour day, that's not going to last long.
Yeah.
That's not going to last for a 20-25 year career, in my opinion. Um, I got a lot of pushback on that opinion and that perspective. But the majority of the reason why, not only because the data didn't show it was going to help us a whole lot, but the other piece to that was I didn't feel like that was really going to create success for our younger cops and lasting a 25, 30-year career. That was an example of me trying to teach them to, this was not going to be good for them, nor was it going to be good for their families.
Yeah.
Um, anyways, that's just another example of trying to teach them.
Well, I think burnout is real. And I think that the older we get, the more perspective we have in life. Like when I was younger, when I was in my 20s, thinking about being in my 30s felt like it was eons away. Like, I'm like, that's so far away. Like, I'm definitely not going to be there anytime soon. And then you wake up in your 30s and you're like, what happened? And there is a lot of learning and growth that happens over time. And I think you're right that we've all done it where it's kind of human nature. Like, maybe you're not really thinking that far ahead when you're young. And then when you have that perspective, when you're older and you've been through it, you have those insights and those words of wisdom where you're like, hey, I'm prioritizing, and I'm speaking as if I'm you, I'm prioritizing your longevity. And so you telling them, hey, like I want you guys to be in this career for 20 years, 25 years. I want you to feel really good. I don't want you to burn out, in 5 years because you're working 14-hour days. And so I think that that does come with time and experience that we kind of have those insights. And honestly, this is one of the reasons why I started this podcast was to offer words of wisdom to, you know, younger officers in their career from individuals like yourself who are in leadership, who have that perspective. And so my last question for you is what words of wisdom would you share when it comes to wellness for someone who is earlier in their career? Maybe something that would have helped you that you wish you would have known, or something that you've done throughout your career that's really helped you?
Um, well, I know we already talked about getting your families involved, so that was definitely one of my thoughts. I think it's important for your friends and family at home to um, sort of know what to look for when you're struggling. I also talked already about finding something outside of work, an activity with a friend, golf, surfing, mountain bike riding,
Mm.
working out, something to burn good or burn the negative energy and have a good time with a friend away from work. And you can talk about something non-work related. Um, I think other than that, the one of the big things for me is trying to find that perfect balance between work and your personal life. Um, it's hard because you don't, let's say, for example, get promoted unless you're putting in that extra effort, right? And maybe spending a couple extra hours at work to finish that project and all those sort of things. Um, but at the same time, there's got to be a balance where you don't forget to prioritize your family. And if you have kids, obviously your kids. Where you can achieve success at work, if you so desire to get promoted and move up the ranks, but you're also mentally and physically well to be with your family, and your friends. So I don't know if I necessarily have the perfect formula to offer, but I think just make sure that your life stays balanced, where you could still achieve success at work, but you also are successful and healthy at home.
Thank you. I appreciate your time so much, and I appreciate your insights and your words of wisdom. If there's anything else we missed, anything else you want to add, I'll let you have the floor. Otherwise, that's all I have for you, and I appreciate your time so much.
No, I mean, I actually just want to thank you for all the work that you put into this, and just wellness in general for first responders. It's important. I think it's great that the topic is starting to really explode across the country, and I think there's a lot of good energy that's going into it. And it's long overdue, but I think we're trending as a profession in a good direction.
Yeah,
So
I
thanks
do
for your work.
too. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I've been in this space for 8 years, so not as long as you, for sure. But I do agree with you. I think that we see that the momentum going in a really positive direction. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for your time and trusting me and coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
All right, take care.
You too. Thank you.
Bye bye.